Mike, welcome to the podcast. My
Hi, Theo.
favorite thing to do in the world is chat with incredible people like you. Hello,
Hey,
welcome.
how you doing? Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Theo.
Oh, real pleasure to have you on, mate. And would you just like to let people know who you are, what you do, what you're about? Give yourself a little introduction.
Absolutely. So I'm look that way. I'm Mike. Mike Bedford. I'm director of Be Brilliant People Development Limited. And much like yourself, Theo, I'm very much involved in the space of neurodiversity, particularly neuro inclusion in the workplace. That's where I focus the majority of my attention. I also provide executive coaching and mentoring for neurodivergent leaders. But I decided quite an early sort of stage of my business while I kind of forming my business plan and idea and strategy where I could make the most impact. And that's the workplace for me.
Brilliant. Love it. And an incredible job you do as well. Winning awards along the way, right, Mike?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your recognition as well for being one of the top 80 neurodiverse people to follow in the UK as well, which was quite a surprise, but quite a humbling and welcome surprise as well. So thank you very much for that. Some great people out there doing great things, including yourself as well. But yeah, the other award that you can kind of see up there is the 2022 Coaching Leader of the Year award, which I picked up again last year, and yeah, that was another great moment in my career.
And a lot of hard work and effort has gone into it. I know. So the thing is, Mike, thanks for that, because that's one of the things I think we recognize, you and I, because we spoke about it. But
Mm.
the importance of supporting one another in this community, right? Because
Yeah,
it's a small world that we live in when we talk about neurodiversity, where it's at, where it's
yeah,
developed over the last few
yeah,
years.
yeah,
And I think just respecting, appreciating, supporting one another is really important, because
yeah,
there's a lot of energy and effort and hard work that goes into that most people they don't see. They
no,
just get to see maybe the podcast recordings or the nice posts on LinkedIn or whatever else it may be. But ultimately,
yeah,
there's a lot of graft that's gone in to be able to get to the point at which you are today. And it is graft every single day that continues to go on in this
yeah,
very small, niche, nuanced space
yeah,
that's growing, right? Which is exciting. So tell us a
yeah,
little bit
definitely.
about your background, Mike, and how you've come to
Yeah,
get to do what you do today, and your thoughts around neurodiversity, this wonderful
mm,
concept.
yeah. No, thank you. Thanks so much. So a bit about my background. So I decided to set up my business because I wanted to kind of make a difference, right? That's kind of what most of us do. And as I said, I decided that I could make a difference in terms of the workplace because my background is kind of business, HR, corporate space, people development, organizational development, ED&I, coaching, and I wanted to kind of fuse all of those things together with the fact that obviously I'm neurodivergent myself as well. Neurospicy is kind of a word I like to use for myself because I'm a cocktail of all kinds of different things. Without kind of focusing too much on lots of different labels. Yeah, you too. A lot of people have kind of got not just kind of one or the other. You're kind of a mix of different things. Hence the neurospicy. And I kind of wanted to gel all of that stuff together, so that neurospicy enough, but with my background and qualifications and experience in terms of like the business space and how organizations work, function, operate, and thereby how could I kind of help organizations and leaders to become more inclusive places where they could attract, retain, and develop the best talent in the market as well. So I think it goes without saying that it's a pretty tough place out there if you're different, and that occurs across a lot of characteristics as well. And when you think about neurodiversity, I don't think you can talk about it without talking about intersectionality, right? Because intersectionality, breaking it down its most layman's terms, is like covers all the different people in all the different communities and underrepresented groups and so on and so forth. So you can be black, white, straight, gay, single, married, from a lower socioeconomic background or whatever, and be neurodivergent and be disabled and so on and so forth. So it's just recognizing all of those connections as well. And for me, the workplace has been an interesting area for a long time. Looking at it from my perspective as someone who kind of wants to understand how they work and what opportunities they create to support inclusion and to support enabling the best out of people within them as well. So I decided that I wanted to turn my attention and pull all my energy and strengths into working with senior leaders, HR leaders, ED&I leaders, leaders in organizations to help them transform their systems, processes, and ways of working holistically, thinking about like the entire employee life cycle journey. So before someone joins an organization, to all the steps through the organization and then out of the organization, how can we make sure that that's as inclusive as possible for people who might not necessarily fit the mold?
Brilliant. And how are you finding that, Mike? What is your perception of the marketplace at the moment? What is the level of interest in
Yeah,
organizations and individuals and senior leaders really
yeah,
taking this on board? And how much further do
yeah,
you think we
yeah.
have to go?
Yeah. So it's a journey. I mean, let's make no mistake. I mean, when and for anyone who understands anything about how organizations work, when you start talking about culture change doesn't happen overnight. So it's a journey, and it's important to understand that that journey is going to take time as well. I think there's a huge appetite out there amongst leaders and amongst organizations to create more inclusive, empowered workspaces and workforces for sure. But it's not an overnight. It's not a quick fix. It's not something that me or you, for example, or others in this space can come in and do a quick talk and everything's going to be solved. Not at all. It's more systemic change. So that's where my coaching background comes in as well. So I work with organizations leaders to coach them, to empower them, and to enable them to longer term support and enable these changes. So it's again not just a quick fix. If I'm coming in and working with someone for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever that is, again, that's only short termism. It's about how can I support them longer term. So like measuring the longer term impact of change within organizations. So using that coaching to empower and enable them to be able to support that shift on a more sustainable level.
Brilliant. And I suppose it's when you open Pandora's box, if you if you realize that a lot of the stuff coming out of it about your systems, your processes, your ways of working are
Mm.
poor,
Yeah,
it's easy just to go, I'm putting that lid back on, I don't want to deal with it,
yeah,
than to go, I've got to go through the pain barrier of the realization that we've been getting stuff wrong. And
yeah,
to rectify it, we may need to go through some pain before we can get to the point of
yeah,
improvement.
yeah.
Is the reality, and I think that's where you can step in and do an incredible job. So just thinking about this, then talking about where we are, where we're going to. We've just had uh, Neurodiversity Celebration Week
Yeah,
that has exploded. Started off in
yeah,
schools, which was
yeah, yeah,
great, some recognition
yeah,
within
yeah.
schools, and has grown even further.
Mm,
I've been
mm,
involved in it myself.
yeah.
Thousands upon thousands of people getting involved. What are your thoughts about
Mm,
Neurodiversity Celebration Week? And I guess any
mm,
kind of
mm,
event where we pick out an hour, a day, a week,
mm,
a month
mm.
to recognize something.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a great question, and I'm a huge fan of any kind of celebration or awareness raising event. Of course, I am. We want to kind of keep flying the flag and raising awareness and celebrating and just keep it on the radar, basically. I guess playing devil's advocate, I think probably one of my concerns, and over 25 years working in corporate would support this hypothesis, is that actually events can become kind of like once and done type things as well. So if you're working as I've done in kind of like large corporate or small corporate HR teams and things like that, there's a lot of excitement around kind of like diversity events. So disability awareness month or neurodivergence awareness month or so on and so forth, neurodiversity celebration week. There's lots of activity, a flurry of activity, and everything happens in a week. There's lots of different things you can go to, things you can read, resources, events you can watch, and this, that, and the other. It's great, but that's for a week, right? What happens then for the other 51 weeks of the year, whatever, and what happens then after that as well? Do we just wait for the next neurodiversity celebration week to come along before we do anything again? And for me, I guess there's that risk. I'm not saying that that's all organizations. Some may continue to carry on with that afterwards, but for me, that's the thing. That's what counts most in organization, is the so what happens next. I think is what's really important as well. It's kind of, how do you then take what you've done, build on that, and make sure that that continues and continuously throughout the year as well. And how can you change that? How can you use that? Yes, as a platform, it is a platform, but how can you build on that platform? If that's your foundations, then how can you start laying the bricks and building the house?
And that's brilliant. So that's saying to those people who are involved, and when I say involved, I mean the people who've gone along to watch,
Yeah,
the people who've gone to the cinema and they've watched
yeah,
this incredibly impactful film. They've walked out and said, "My life is never going to be the same again." And then the
yeah,
next
yeah,
week, they
yeah.
can't really remember the film. They're too busy, they're consumed. We need to
100%.
find ways and mechanisms for those people now who've come, the
Yeah,
thousands of people who may have attended and seen something, and a light may have been switched on. We need
yeah,
to
yeah,
find mechanisms to carry that forwards. And I guess that's where the coaching piece is really
yeah,
key to
yeah.
ensuring
It is.
longevity in terms
Yeah.
of change and transformation in the
Co-
space.
Coaching helps the learning stick, right? I think if you kind of put it down to the most, we talk about, and my background's kind of like, again, learning and development, organization development. In learning and development terms, we all always talk about, you go along to a training or a workshop event, it's a light bulb moment, it's kind of like it's an epiphany, and you're going to do things, everything's going to change. Then you go back to your desk and you get hit by loads of deadlines and work and things like that, and suddenly that light bulb gets switched off. How do you make sure that learning sticks? And what happens next? I think you're right. I think that's where coaching and impactful coaching, and that's where line managers, particularly line managers and leaders, have a really important and impactful role in terms of making sure that what happens beyond that is what makes that stick. And that's where that real impact, that transformative impact, can help. And I'm not saying that's easy, and that's where I can come in and I can work with organizations around kind of helping them, empower them to ask the right questions and to create that right environment where that learning does stick and what happens next. And it's ultimately about transferring ownership onto others to make sure that that continues. Really, I think that's the important point.
Excellent. And I think that is something that we all do. We get excited about an idea, a concept. We go along, we attend probably lots of different events, some of them online, some of them in person. And it's difficult to run with all these ideas, right? And this is where we get
Yeah,
advocates in the space, people, evangelists, however you want to define them, people
yeah,
who are continuously banging the drum, people who are continuously being able to share the message. And actually, Mike, you and I probably agree. Sometimes
yeah,
it feels like the same message that you're saying again 1,000 different times. So I guess events like this can provide a great platform for people outside the bubble to
yeah.
hear something they may not have heard before. But what we
Yes.
really have to do is find ways
Yeah,
to kind of capture that. And I
yeah,
think that is about community when we talk about
yeah,
supporting one another, coming together, championing one another, so that when these moments happen, we're all there ready to capture those people who require
yeah.
further support, taking this further within their organizations. And I think
Yes.
I've mentioned this before, but it's, people are always talking about getting buy-in at the top of organizations. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of these do not survive unless you can
No,
make significant impact and change in middle management.
that's
And
100% right.
so that is the kind of what we need to now do, right, after these incredible events, which I think why this conversation is so important with you today, is
Yeah,
to harness all of that, to ensure that we can then support those people coming out of it, and that they can find not a 3-week path, not
no,
a 2 month path, but actually what they're going to do for the next 12 to
yeah,
24 months
yeah, yeah,
around
yeah.
real change and transformation within their organizations.
It's a
It's going to
plan.
directly
It's a
impact
plan.
people's lives.
You need a plan. You need a strategy. You need a plan, and I know that kind of like that ultimately people are like, oh my god, another strategy. But you need a plan. Without a plan, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I realize that it's not the fun kind of glam stuff where everyone's getting on stage and the spectacular of the awareness event, right? That's like you said. I think, to quote your visualization of the kind of like the show-stopping premiere. When I went to see kind of like the Fellowship of the Ring for the first time, I didn't think it could get any better. I thought my life had changed forever. Do you know what I mean? And then I walked out of the cinema, and life kind of like hit me in the face. And It's about continuing. It's about picking up and actually, well, okay, so that's great, but what do we do next? What steps, what actions who do we need to involve? What voices do we need to bring into this to make sure that that's a success? And it's not just HR people. It's not just kind of ED&I. It's not just kind of a small selection of people in your organization. It needs to be a collective effort and bringing in all of those voices as well. So yes, it's important to kind of like promote awareness and get people who might not necessarily normally hear this message to get involved with that. But how are you going to create and sustain that long-term impact is by bringing all of those voices together to create that change and to create that and have a plan. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. What do you reckon is the main barrier that we're facing now on really making a difference with neurodiversity within organizations? Do you think
Yeah.
there's maybe a few things people could take away as kind of next steps to overcome some of those barriers, how to influence their organizations to think differently,
Yeah.
or opportunities, if not barriers, I guess? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's always opportunities. I think opportunities are plenty, but you've got to be asking the right questions to find out what those opportunities are, right? As well. So I think there's definitely an appetite. I'm not sensing there's a drop in appetite. I am sensing budgets are always going to be a challenge for everybody, and particularly given that we're living in the times that we're living in. But there's a lot of things that you can do that aren't massively overly expensive as well. Let's be clear. I've heard a lot of messages saying that you can do. It doesn't have to cost anything. You can do things for free. No, you can't. You can't do everything for free as well. So I have to dispel that myth as well, because that's just not true. It's disingenuous to suggest that. And the people that are suggesting that are taking large amounts of money out of organisations as well, and then coming on platforms and saying that you can do everything for free. You can't. That's just a nonsense. And you have to invest in it. I think that's important. You do have to invest, but invest in the right ways. And I think if you just kind of like throw money at a wall and hope it sticks, then that's not really going to help you either. So I think we talked earlier, didn't we, about kind of speaking the language of leaders and things like that. So you have to be communicating and talking in the right language to leaders as well. So helping them understand, working with them, I guess. So if I was going in in a consultancy capacity, and I'm speaking to yourself, Theo, who knows this as well. So if you're going in a consulting capacity with an organization, with a leadership team, I wouldn't just come in and kind of say I've got all the solutions. Yeah, I mean, I just kind of come in and say first and foremost, so what are you doing in this space? What's working well? What isn't working well? And how do you know that? So it's asking the right questions first of all, so you can identify what the gaps are, so you know where you need to focus, right? Because if you don't have any focus, again, you're just throwing jelly at a wall and hope it sticks. So you've got to be able to ask the right questions and then laser-like focus on the right areas that are going to generate that real measurable and tangible change.
Yeah, and I think a lot of organizations think not here, mate. Like, oh, we don't need to look at it. We don't have a problem, or we don't have people who have additional needs or requirements in terms of
Yeah,
adaptations or whatever else it may be. The reality
yeah,
is they don't know it because they've not asked a question, right? Or they've not
yeah,
dug a bit deeper below the surface. And when you
yeah,
do dig a bit deeper, what you
yeah,
find, if you're willing to ask the question in a way that you're protecting your people, you're not asking them to
yeah,
out themselves, then you will find the answers will be
yeah,
quite surprising, which is what I find, right? When people are willing to dig a bit deeper, when they're willing to lift off the lid of Pandora's box, then
mhm,
they'll be surprised what's there. And if they're willing to truly take it
I think,
on, then that's
yeah.
where they can really make a significant difference.
I think you're right, and I think that comes down to the culture of the organisation as well. And if the culture's not right in the organisation, of course you're not going to get any traction either. Are you? So if it's a box ticking exercise for them, then that's going to be difficult to generate any kind of return on investment or any kind of like create any kind of change or difference within that cultural context as well. So the culture needs to be right as well. So you can't go in and change everything. I think that's ridiculous to be able to suggest that, but you can work with you know organizations that want to change, recognize that, and recognize that they want to work with someone to understand where they perhaps don't have the answers, but you can empower them to actually find that out and to create a longer term sustainable plan that really embeds change within their organizational context.
Brilliant. And what do you think the future looks like from a neurodiversity perspective, Mike? Where could we be in the next 24 months?
I've said it before and I'll say it again. I've said it on other podcasts as well. I think there's never been a better time to be alive if you think differently. And I stand by that statement as well. And I think with the rise of AI and technology and things like that, linear thinking is quickly becoming more and more automated. So if all those kind of like rational, linear concepts where you make a decision and this is what the outcome of that is, more and more of that is going to be automated and done by bots and AI in the future. But what that can't do yet, that's not to say it never will be able to do that in some distant point in the future, um, is to think as neurodivergent people do in that real kind of non-linear abstract way of thinking, that kind of like natural, I call it natural strategic thinking really. And it's kind of like thinking of the outside of that kind of like bubble, and looking down from like that helicopter view. I often describe my kind of like thinking as looking down a helicopter view and looking down and kind of seeing all of the puzzle. I'm kind of like I've kind of like worked it out, and I'm just looking down at the top and thinking, well, that might go there or that might go there, whilst others are kind of there frantically kind of like putting all the pieces together, you know. So I think actually for the future it's exciting, but again we've got to work out with our neurotypical friends and our neurodivergent community. We all need to come together. It's not about us versus them at all. And I think we really need to get past that, and we really need to get past that diverse that way of thinking about separation. I think it's about unity really. It's about kind of bringing all different ways of thinking together to get the best end outcome and results. So no way of thinking is better than the other. No way of thinking is better than the other. Actually, we just think about things differently, and it's about recognizing that and recognizing the strengths and pulling together all of those different people with all those different strengths to get those great end outcomes. And that's where organizations and leaders can really benefit from this.
Brilliant. So a couple of things to pick up on there. One, I like there's no better time now than for diverse minds to be living. And I agree in some ways. The other way of thinking, though, is I think in many respects, if we go back far enough, being on a farm or being, I don't know, working with your hands, or not having the restrictions of being sat in an office by a computer. Like, we don't have to go that far back where then neurodiversity wasn't such an important topic because so many people would have more freedom and flexibility in terms of the way that their mind worked in given environments. Or I say freedom and flexibility, maybe it's not, maybe it's less, maybe it's streamlined into quite manual jobs, but whereas your mind was very active and physically you were very active, and therefore it was just a different world and environment to live in. I sometimes think about myself and my daughter, if she could just live on a farm and manage that farm, and not have to worry about the finances of that farm, but just looking after the animals and stuff. And we weren't worried about careers and everything else.
No.
I imagine she would be a much happier child. She's a happy child, right? But I imagine there would be less problems around her neurodifference, or however you want to define it, or a unique way of thinking.
No, I think it's really good. I really like that kind of like abstract thinking as well.
So we need to get back to the balance, I guess, is what. But you're right. Technology could provide us with that place again, where we don't all have to sit in an office, but we still can work with technology. So therefore, it's that level of freedom and flexibility that specifically for the past 30, 40 years, we've kind of lost that. And obviously, with the fear from parents around children being on the streets, so many more cars, vehicles, like everything has just gone into this kind of digital.
It's become a tighter box, a closer box. Actually, the box has shrunk and become tighter, and we've become more pigeonholed, haven't we, as people as well. And certainly as a coach, when I work with majority of my clients tend to be neurodivergent, which might not be a surprise because they gravitate towards me, I think, because I understand how their minds work. I'm not them. I'm not walked in their shoes, but I do have kind of like a context, and I do kind of understand that they don't think about things in the same sort of way as others do. So certainly when I'm working with neurodivergent clients, one of the things that I always focus around is playing to your strengths. And that's really important to me as well. Whatever that strength might be, in whatever context you're talking about, play to your strengths. Surround yourself with great people, build your own personal tribe, but always focus on and play to your own strengths. I think if you do that, then you can't go far wrong. There's always going to be challenges, and there's people like us and others out there kind of like fighting and trying to create a world which hopefully we'll get to one day, the nirvana, where this talking about this sort of thing don't really need to do that anymore, because it's a level field playing field anyway, and the recognition is that thinking about and doing things differently is just kind of how it's done anyway. But until we get to that point, then you really need to focus on your strengths and build your team around you. And I'm not talking about you're a team leader or a manager. I'm just talking in general as a person. Surround yourself with all those great people who can help you and kind of can help you with all of those things that are challenges for you, so that you can focus on the bloody brilliant things that you're good at, right?
Well, we know the difference between, having people around you who've got your back. That doesn't mean they're not sometimes picking you up on stuff, right? Because that's important. But
Challenge is really
ultimately,
important.
yeah, they remind you of your strengths and what you're great at and what's good about you.
Yeah.
And we all need that, especially
Mm.
in the current world. The other thing is, you picked up on something earlier around kind of being able to come together, and the community. We've picked up a couple of times, but there's something interesting, right? If we think about the political world, right, the political sphere, you have a political party, and within that party, goodness gracious me, they're supposed to be aligned, but most political parties are not. They have the left, the right, the center of every political party, and they have to come to some kind of agreement to be able to move forwards. And often there's a level of compromise or a level of acceptance that you're not going to agree in that element because you're looking after another part of the community. So you may represent a city, but you also represent the country as part of the wider party. I think we need to appreciate and understand that as part of the community as well. That we don't have to agree on everything, do we? We can, because we will have our micro community. We maybe feel more aligned to people in the actually autistic community, for example, but we may also be ADHD, but some of the challenges and strengths come more from there. And therefore that is where we feel most aligned and where we're spending most time coaching, learning, supporting, developing. But ultimately, we have to find ways to come out to the wider community to make decisions that go beyond our self-interest. And I think that's really important.
Oh God, yeah, it's so important. It's so nuanced. We talk about all the time, right? As a community, how we don't want to be, we don't want to think the same as everyone else, right? We want to be, we're different, yeah. Then we can't then not apply that in our own community, right? So we don't all think the same in the neurodiverse community, right? So of course we're all not going to think the same, and we're all going to have our own world views, I call it, right? And that's absolutely fine. And I fully appreciate that not everybody listening to this call is going to agree with me on everything I'm saying, and that's absolutely fine. And listen, and when you realize actually and you welcome change and challenge, I think it opens up new areas of your mind that you've perhaps never explored before as well. I'd just say to anyone, always welcome different viewpoints and different challenge from others as well, because you can learn so much from that and from that process.
Absolutely. So that, I guess, bringing it to a nice rounded close there about working with the community, getting together. I see this year, Mike, as being the year of collaboration within the ND community. So I've made it like my focus. So, and this is part of how we ended up talking right initially, which is incredible. So what would you say is the big focus for you now in the next 12 months? What are you excited about? And then where can people find you and seek you out?
Yeah, thank you. So like yourself, I think collaboration is really important. So I talk a lot about tribes and building tribes, because that's really important. And I believe there's a book out there called Neuro Tribes, actually, which I really need to read. And for me, kind of like building those tribes is really important, and neuro tribes encompassing. So I'm talking about building tribes with neurodivergent and neurotypical people here, right, as well. So I can really kind of get a rounded tribe, and kind of building that team. I talk about team again, that team around me to support me, to enable me to kind of do the great things that I want to do in terms of enabling and empowering the workplace to make the workplace fit for the future, and to make the workplace as inclusive and accessible for everybody as possible, because I always say that inclusion benefits everyone as well, right? So when you have a place of inclusion, everyone benefits from that as well. And I want to keep working towards making the workplace a level playing field where that attracts all kinds of great, weird and wonderful and diverse talent to it, because that's where great things happen, right? When you get stuck in a place where everyone thinks the same and does the same, you get think tank, and we don't want to get to that place. We want organizations that are wonderfully diverse and think about things differently, because that creates innovation, creativity, change, everything else, all of those wonderful things that we need in abundance right now, with everything that's happening around us in abundance. Listen, we live in really volatile and uncertain times, so we really need to up our game. Organizations, leaders need to up their game to create those kind of really agile and flexible workspaces where diversity is not only welcomed, it's sought after as well. So, I'm going to continue. My priorities this year is to continue working with leaders and with organizations to empower and enable that shift in the workplace. But in terms of where you can find me, I hang out on LinkedIn quite a lot. So it's LinkedIn Mike Bedford. It's unmistakable as my profile. So if you find my profile, you'll find me. It's colourful and creative. All of those kind of things that I like. Bright colours, lots of bees around me, and hence the name Be Brilliant People, which is a story for another day. But if you check out my website, which is up there, bebrilliantpeople.com, you can learn a little bit about kind of why all the bees and things like that. But that's a story in itself. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter as well, so you can find me on Twitter as well at Be Brilliant People. Be Brill People, I think it is, at Be Brill People on Twitter. But yeah, they're the main places that I hang out, and then joining cool people like yourself, Theo, on podcasts and talking about all of this great stuff that we're doing to create, and all the other change makers are doing to create change out there in the world and the workplace.
Incredible. I think the something you were touching upon there, right? If we can, something I was taking from what you were saying, if we can work as hard as those people work to spread negative information, disinformation, and to kind of push the negative rhetoric, we need to almost work as hard to push what we know to be the right thing. Sometimes you just sit quietly back and don't push it as hard. I think that's what we can do as a community. We can come together positively. I don't mean like aggressively, negatively. I mean positively come together to really drive this message forwards, because we have to drive it as hard as the negative rhetoric that I think is out there. And this is about the future sustainability of the planet, of business, of relationships. I truly believe neurodiversity as a place right at the center of all of those conversations.
Just really fine. I think you hit on a really important point there. I just wanted to just recap on, and that's that kind of like that spreading of fake news and lies about people. And I know what you're talking about those particular items that perhaps were published recently in like the Times and things like that. Really kind of like dispelling ADHD as just kind of like some like lazy syndrome or whatever. Put your phone down, that'll actually fix you. Just absolute nonsense. And I've seen great examples of people like Leanne Maskell's a great example of actually calling it out and doing really proactive work to challenge that, constructively challenge that as well, and really go out there to support the community. And I picked up one of her templates and wrote to my local MP about it. So things like that. So kudos to Leanne and to others out there who are doing fantastic things like that as well, and really kind of supporting us to have a voice and to constructively challenge back on those type of things as well. So I think that's really important.
Amazing. So yeah, we need to continue championing the voice of others, be partners to others, listen to others, and try and drive that message forward this year. Big year for neurodiversity and those who are championing it. Mike, thank you so much. Great to have you on. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege.
Likewise. Thank you so much for inviting me on and for allowing me to share this platform.